What if I told you that intelligence has almost nothing to do with how much you know? Not your IQ, not your grades, not the number of books you've read. Because if knowledge alone made people successful, the smartest person in every room would always make the best decisions. But that's not how life works. You've probably seen it yourself. Someone incredibly talented loses their temper over a small disagreement. Someone with years of experience keeps repeating the same mistakes. Someone who can explain exactly how to build a better life never seems able to build one for themselves. So here's the question. What separates the people who quietly move forward from the people who stay stuck? It isn't luck. It isn't talent. And surprisingly, it isn't intelligence, not in the way most people think. The difference lies in something much smaller, something almost invisible. It's the way they think in ordinary moments. The moment someone criticizes them, the moment a plan falls apart, the moment they fail, the moment they feel ignored, the moment fear tells them to quit. Most people believe those moments reveal who they are, but they don't. They reveal how they've trained themselves to think. And that's good news. Because if thinking can be trained, it can also be changed. You don't need to become a different person. You don't need another motivational speech. You don't need to memorize hundreds of life lessons. Sometimes, changing just one way of looking at the world changes everything that comes after it. Today, I want to share 5 mental shifts, not productivity hacks, not psychological tricks, but quiet shifts that slowly reshape the way you make decisions, handle pressure, and respond to life. They're simple enough to overlook, yet powerful enough to quietly place you ahead of most people you'll ever meet. And by the end of this video, I hope you won't leave believing you're smarter than everyone else. I hope you'll leave realizing that real intelligence has never been about knowing more. It's about becoming harder to shake. Stop trying to be right. Start trying to understand. Imagine you're in the middle of an argument. Maybe it's with your partner, a friend, a coworker. Halfway through the conversation, something interesting happens. You stop listening, not because you don't care, but because your mind quietly begins preparing its next response. You're no longer trying to understand what the other person is saying. You're waiting for your turn to prove they're wrong. We've all done it. In fact, most people don't enter conversations looking for truth. They enter looking for victory. And that's where real intelligence quietly disappears. Because the moment winning becomes more important than understanding, curiosity dies. The smartest people I've ever met weren't the ones who always had the best answers. They were the ones who asked the best questions. Instead of asking, "How do I prove my point?" they asked, "What am I missing?" Instead of defending their beliefs, they tested them. Instead of assuming they already understood someone, they became genuinely interested in how another person could see the same situation so differently. That simple shift changes everything. Because understanding someone doesn't mean agreeing with them. It simply means you've chosen curiosity over ego. And curiosity has a strange effect. It slows you down. It makes you notice details that anger usually hides. It gives people enough safety to lower their defenses. Ironically, the less you try to win conversations, the more influence you begin to have. People rarely change because they lost an argument. They change because they felt understood. The same is true for you. Some of the biggest breakthroughs in your life won't happen when someone gives you a better answer. They'll happen when you finally ask yourself a better question. So, the next time you're about to interrupt someone, pause. Ask one more question. Listen for 1 minute longer than feels comfortable. You might discover that intelligence isn't measured by how quickly you respond. Sometimes it's measured by how long you're willing to stay curious. And once you stop trying to win every conversation, you'll notice something unexpected. You no longer need to protect your ego quite so often. You finally have enough space to grow. Because growth has never belonged to the person who is always right. It belongs to the person who is always willing to learn. Stop judging moments. Start seeing patterns. Think about the last time something didn't go your way. Maybe you didn't get the job. Maybe someone ignored your message. Maybe you made a mistake during an important meeting. What happened next? For most people, the event lasts a few minutes. But the story they tell themselves lasts for days. This always happens to me. I'm just not good enough. I'll probably fail again. One small moment quietly becomes a conclusion about an entire life. And that's where people trap themselves. Because the human brain has a habit of turning isolated events into permanent identities. One failure becomes, I'm a failure. One rejection becomes, no one values me. One bad week becomes, my life is falling apart. But reality almost never works that way. Highly effective people don't experience fewer setbacks. They simply refuse to build their identity around a single moment. Instead, they ask a different question. What pattern created this? That question changes everything. Because patterns can be changed. Moments can't. Imagine a pilot flying through heavy clouds. If they only looked out the window, they might think they're flying in circles. But the instruments tell a completely different story. Your life works the same way. Your emotions only show you today's weather. Patterns reveal the direction you're actually moving. That's why emotionally intelligent people rarely panic over one bad day. They zoom out. They look for repetition instead of exceptions. They ask, has this happened before? What keeps leading me here? What small adjustment would change the next outcome? Notice the difference. They're not protecting their ego. They're improving their system. That's why they recover faster. Not because they're stronger, but because they waste less energy judging themselves. The next time something goes wrong, resist the urge to give that moment too much power. Instead of asking, why does this always happen to me? Try asking, what is this moment trying to teach me about the pattern I've been repeating? One question keeps you trapped inside the problem. The other quietly moves you toward the solution. And over time, you'll realize something surprising. Your future is shaped far less by your biggest successes than by the small patterns you choose to improve every single day. There is another habit that quietly separates calm people from everyone else. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with confidence. It has everything to do with what happens in the tiny space between an event and your response. Picture this. You send an important message. Hours go by. No reply. Almost instantly, your mind begins writing a story. They're ignoring me. I must have said something wrong. They're upset. Within seconds, you've reacted not to reality, but to a story your mind created. We've all done it. Someone cuts us off in traffic. A coworker makes a sarcastic comment. A family member says something that feels unfair. And before we even understand what happened, we've already decided how to feel. That's what reacting does. It hands control of your emotions to whatever happens around you. Observation does the opposite. Observation creates space. A few seconds that most people never notice. But inside those few seconds lives your freedom. Instead of asking, why did they do this to me? Try asking, what else could be true? Maybe they're having a difficult day. Maybe they misunderstood you. Maybe the story you're telling yourself is only one of 10 possible explanations. The people who seem emotionally unshakable aren't born calmer than everyone else. They've simply trained themselves to delay judgment. Not forever, just long enough to see more clearly. That tiny pause changes conversations. It changes relationships. Sometimes, it changes entire lives. Because once emotion settles, details begin to appear. You notice tone instead of just words. You notice context instead of assumptions. You notice your own reactions before they become your actions. And that's where real emotional strength begins. Not in controlling other people, not in pretending you never feel angry, but in refusing to let your first impulse make your final decision. The next time life surprises you, don't rush to explain it. Don't rush to defend yourself. Don't rush to fight back. Pause. Take one slow breath. Give reality a chance to arrive before your imagination does. You may discover that most of the battles exhausting you were never happening outside your mind in the first place. Something else begins to change when you stop trying to control everything. For a long time, I believed peace came from certainty. If I planned carefully enough, if I thought through every possibility, if I prepared for every mistake, then nothing could surprise me. But life has a strange way of humbling that belief. No matter how carefully you plan, people will still disappoint you. Unexpected opportunities will appear. Unexpected problems will appear too. Some conversations won't go the way you imagined. Some decisions will always involve incomplete information. And that's exactly where most people become stuck. They wait. They wait until they're completely certain. Certain that it's the right decision. Certain that they won't fail. Certain that everything will work out. The problem is, life never offers that kind of certainty. It only offers the next step. If you look closely at people who consistently move forward, you'll notice something interesting. They aren't fearless. They aren't reckless. They simply understand that clarity often comes after action, not before it. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. You didn't study balance until you understood it perfectly. You found balance because you kept moving. Life works the same way. Some answers only reveal themselves once you're already walking. Waiting for perfect certainty feels safe, but it quietly becomes another form of procrastination. Not because you're lazy, because your brain mistakes certainty for safety. And those are not the same thing. Real confidence isn't saying, I know this will work. Real confidence is saying, even if it doesn't, I'll learn something worth carrying into the next attempt. That's a completely different mindset. One depends on outcomes. The other depends on trust. Trust in your ability to adapt. Trust in your ability to recover. Trust that one imperfect decision rarely defines an entire life. So, the next time you find yourself waiting for the perfect moment, ask yourself one simple question. Am I waiting because I need more information? Or because I'm afraid of making a mistake? The answer might change more than the decision itself. Because the people who quietly move ahead in life don't control the future. They become the kind of person who can handle whatever future arrives. Maybe the greatest advantage you can ever develop has nothing to do with intelligence. It's your attention. Because whether you realize it or not, your attention is quietly building your life. Every headline you click, every argument you replay, every opinion that lives rent-free in your mind, every hour spent comparing yourself to someone else's highlight reel. Little by little, your attention becomes your identity. Most people believe they're choosing what to focus on. The truth is, more often than not, something else is choosing for them. Notifications, algorithms, breaking news, endless opinions. Tiny distractions that don't seem important on their own. Yet together, they slowly train the mind to react instead of reflect. That's why so many people finish the day feeling mentally exhausted without accomplishing anything meaningful. Their energy wasn't stolen. Their attention was. Now think about the people who always seem calm, the ones who rarely panic, the ones who don't feel the need to comment on everything, the ones who somehow keep making steady progress while everyone else seems overwhelmed. They aren't living in a different world. They're simply protecting a different resource. They understand that attention is limited. Every unnecessary argument costs attention. Every meaningless comparison costs attention. Every imagined future costs attention. And once attention is scattered, clear thinking becomes almost impossible. So they become selective, not because they don't care, but because they care deeply about where their mind lives. Imagine carrying a glass of water filled right to the edge. Every distraction is another small bump. One bump doesn't matter. Neither does the second, or the third. But eventually, the water begins to spill, not because the glass was weak, because it was never designed to absorb endless impact. Your mind is no different. You don't become mentally stronger by carrying more. You become mentally stronger by carrying less. Less noise, less comparison, less emotional clutter, and more space for what truly matters. Maybe that's what real intelligence has been all along. Not having an answer for everything, but knowing what deserves your attention and having the courage to let everything else pass by. Because the quality of your life will never rise above the quality of your attention. Protect it carefully. Everything else grows from there. If you've noticed something while listening today, I hope it isn't just one of these 5 ideas. I hope you've noticed a pattern. None of these shifts asked you to become someone else. They didn't ask you to be more talented, or more confident, or more intelligent. They simply asked you to think a little differently in the ordinary moments that quietly shape an extraordinary life. The next time someone disagrees with you, choose curiosity over ego. The next time you make a mistake, look for the pattern instead of the punishment. The next time emotions begin pulling you in every direction, pause before you react. The next time uncertainty makes you freeze, take the next step anyway. And when the world competes for your attention, remember that where your attention goes, your life quietly follows. Real growth rarely happens in dramatic moments. It happens in conversations nobody remembers, in decisions nobody applauds, in quiet choices nobody sees. That's why so many people miss it, because they're looking for loud transformations. While real transformation is almost always silent, maybe becoming wiser was never about becoming a different person. Maybe it has always been about returning to the person you could have been if fear, distraction, and ego hadn't been making so many decisions for you. So don't leave this video trying to remember every lesson. Choose just one. Practice it for the next 7 days. Then come back and notice what has changed. Not around you, inside you. If this conversation gave you a new way of looking at yourself, let me know by commenting quiet growth, not for me, for yourself, because the moment you can name the person you're becoming, you've already taken the first step toward becoming them. And if you're interested in building a calmer mind, clearer thinking, and a quieter kind of strength, I'd love to have you here for the next conversation. Until then, take care of your attention. The rest of your life will quietly follow.